Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, I'm going to speak about the need for policy resets. We're in a fairly dire situation if you consider the state of the global economy, the state of Europe, the state of the US, particularly given the possibility of a fiscal cliff early next year. And it seems that policymakers are doing little to nothing right. Let me start with this chart. I always like this chart because it's a potted history of the economic evolution of the planet. It starts in 1970, and if you take a look at the ups and downs of the economy, the downs have always been associated with some particular event. The first down you see in the middle 1970s, anybody remember? OPEC 1, oil price shock. Early 1980s, oil again, OPEC 2. Early 1990s, first Gulf War. Mid-90s, Asian financial crisis. 2000, 2001, dot-com bubble. And finally, 2009, subprime crisis. Notice that the subprime crisis is worse than any other. Also notice that the recovery from the subprime crisis is particularly poor. We are not stringing together a series of robust years where we put back all the people that we left unemployed. We had a brief spurt in 2010 brought on by policy stimulus. But that stimulus has either ended or reversed. And consequently, the world is already growing at extremely anemic rate. See, the long-term average is 3.6, 3.7. 4 is a good number. Anything much below the average is kind of lackluster. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in. Now let's start by we're going to take a look at 3 regions of the world. I'm going to start briefly with China. And there you can see the progressive slowing of the Chinese economy. You can see the progressive slowdown that we have had since the end of 2009, beginning of 2010. Now, progressive slowdown reflects a number of factors, but one is the absence of stimulative policy. Now, in China, one of the most useful indicators of what the government is trying to do with the economy is to look at loan growth. Because when the economy slowed down in 2008, mid-2008, they basically said to the banks, go out and make loans. And you can see that massive surge in lending that started right at the end of 2008 and really cranked up in 2009. And the result of that was to bring about a stimulus that allowed the economy to bounce back strongly. Now, despite that progressive slowing that we've seen, there's a complete absence of stimulative policy. The Chinese economy is being allowed to slow. Now, there's 2 possible reasons for that. One is policy paralysis in the run-up to the leadership transition. The other is that now policymakers are willing to live with a lower rate of growth. But, as you can see, nothing is being done to offset that slowdown. Now let's turn to the United States. This is a I thought I'd switch and use the unemployment rate because it's a little simpler than GDP. Look at what happened to our unemployment rate during the Great Recession. It more than doubled. It went from a number 4.5 roughly up to 10. Look how slowly it's coming down. Normally, the US economy undergoes V-shaped recoveries. You go down, you bounce back strongly. By post-war standards, this is a 1/3 speed recovery. We think we know why. We think that it reflects all the damage that was done to household balance sheets during the Great Recession when house prices are down 30%. We know it reflects the problems in housing, which has prevented the sector from rebounding. But it's much less widely understood how much it reflects government policy. Because we're all aware of the austerity that is occurring in Europe. You might be surprised to hear that the austerity is all too real here in the United States. Here's a chart of total government purchases. Now, this doesn't include expenditures on things like Medicare, but it includes the discretionary purchases, which are direct components of GDP, and they are from the federal government, defense, non-defense, and from state and local governments. And you can see that we are now back to the levels at the end of the Bush administration. There has been no net increase in discretionary spending by federal and state and local governments over the last almost 4 years. And you can see the decline over the last 2. Now let me put that decline in some kind of historical perspective for you. This is looking at the same data, but in a slightly different form. We're looking at its rate of change now. And I go all the way back to 1960 to provide you with a historical perspective. We have not seen a cutback like this since Richard Nixon decided that he wanted to Vietnamize the Vietnam conflict. Yet there's an intellectual foundation for expansionary or more government spending during these times of high unemployment. It's not being followed. We know about it in Europe, not being followed here either. Now let's turn to Europe. This is the unemployment rate in the overall Eurozone. That's the 17 countries that use the common currency. You can see their experience was similar to ours. A big increase in unemployment, 2008 to 2009. They haven't even managed to see any reduction in unemployment. They did no better than really flatten it. And now it's rising again. It's not a question anymore about whether the Eurozone will double dip. The Eurozone is back in recession. It has double dipped. Now this is the overall zone. So you have, this obviously includes Germany, where unemployment is at its lowest level since reunification. They're booming. Let's go and take a look at the periphery. Greece. Notice the scale, not just the shape. Look at the scale over on the left-hand side. 25% unemployment in Greece. 1 in 4 people. And you can see, I think, from the shape of that, do you want to call a turning point? Now, in the case of Greece, I think you could blame the government for some of the bad things that have happened there. They did spend too much money, and they weren't entirely forthcoming about it. But let's take a look at 2 other economies. the former Celtic tiger known as Ireland. Their unemployment rate went from a number below 5 to about 15. They've managed to flatten it over the last year or so. Their government wasn't irresponsible. Their government didn't spend too much. The irresponsibility in Ireland reflected bank behavior. The same can be said of Spain. Again, look at the magnitude of unemployment, 25%. These are the kinds of levels that we have not seen in the United States since the 1930s. And it represents a dreadful waste of talent. I feel that if China, the United States, and Europe could fix its fiscal policies, it could make a dent here. But I want to finish my talk today by highlighting another problem that Europe has that goes beyond standard fiscal policy. It represents a fundamental structural flaw of the zone that they've created. They've created something which fundamentally doesn't work. And to demonstrate that, I want to show you this chart. And it represents prices in the 3 largest economies in Europe. It's essentially, red line, prices in Germany. The green line, prices in France. And the blue line, prices in Italy. Now, you think, well, how does it matter? Does it matter that prices are rising more in Italy than in Germany? Does it matter if prices rise more in Florida than Massachusetts? The answer to the first question is yes, and the answer to the second question is really no. This matters a great deal because it means that Germany is now super competitive against 2 of its major trading partners at the same time that it has locked its exchange rate against them. Okay? What is the effect of that? The effect is that Germany is doomed to boom and the others are doomed to slump. Now this goes back and it takes a look at the level of output produced by German industry in the red, and you can see that today that is approximately 25% higher than it was when European Monetary Union began January the 1st, 1999. French industrial output is down about 5%. Italian industrial output is down 15%, below where it was in 1999. So you have one economy which is booming, one economy which is essentially stagnant, and one economy which is going in reverse. And it's created by these discrepancies. Because there's only 2 ways to compensate for discrepancies like this. Before monetary union, this kind of discrepancy would have led to an appreciation of the Deutschmark and a depreciation of the Italian lira. And they would have restored competitiveness that way. Essentially, that's how post-war Europe muddled through this problem. The alternative, and this is why prices being out of line in Florida and Massachusetts don't matter, is a system of fiscal transfers which compensates for the performance that is created by this divergence. That's what the Eurozone needs. in addition to a policy reset, where they refocus from austerity towards stimulus, they also need to make a very clear distinction, a very clear decision. Either admit that monetary union was a step too far, because who wants to be part of this? Or go all in. Make the decision that the current structure is flawed. It's a monster. It can be slayed or it can be tamed. Go all in, tame the monster, and do it through a banking, a political, and a fiscal union. I don't believe that there's any other choice. So I thank you for your time and attention today, and I hope the message is that policymakers, whomever they are, have a great deal of work to do, and more fundamentally, they really need to rethink where they're at. Thank you.